lovely to be here. So thanks for inviting me along. Um, so as she said, I'm the dietitian for the Irish Heart Foundation. I've been working in the heart health space for many years now. I've worked in previously in the past in St. James's Hospital in cardiothoracic surgery and lipid clinics and cardiac rehab, and I've been with the Irish Heart Foundation for the last 4.5 years. So I love talking about all things food and heart health. So if you do have any questions at all as we go through this, pop them into the chat and we can talk about them at the end. Um, I know that you sent in a few questions beforehand, so we will go through some of those now. So, oh God, this is going on its own time. Oh, I don't know why it's okay. It's must be timed. Oh, sorry about this. So I guess we'll have to have everything pop up at once. Um, so what we're going to be covering today is looking at after stroke how you protect your heart and your brain going forward, and also a couple of stroke specific considerations. So people sent in queries around uh, healthy eating when you have lots and lots of fatigue, when you're really tired and you don't have the energy for meal prep. Um, Other things like constipation, maybe in relation to medication, so how to deal with that kind of thing. And then we'll go through a couple of useful resources and, of course, lots and lots of time for your questions at the end. So I also another interesting one that came up was somebody who's missing salt a lot, like they're doing their best to cook without salt, but they're really missing that flavor. So that's one that comes up a lot. We'll talk through. Um, so protecting your heart and brain.
May I ask, just before we start, save us taking notes, will we get slides at the end?
Yes, this will all be recorded so you can watch it back again. I
Oh,
think we're
brilliant.
creating a YouTube playlist, so so it'll be up there on YouTube, and you can rewatch again and again
Oh, great.
if you
Thank
want
you.
to. um, yeah, save you taking notes. Um, so in terms of what we should be eating after a stroke, a lot of times we hear, oh, low fat diet, but that's not necessarily the where the most evidence is. Um, the Mediterranean diet is probably the most well evidenced pattern of eating after any kind of heart or stroke event. We know that it reduces the risk of recurrent stroke or heart attack by 25%, which is significant. And this is really, really big studies done over many, many years. Um, but essentially, what it comes down to, in a way, is having 3 balanced meals per day of relatively equal size. So making sure you're fueling your body at the times of the day that you need the energy. So maybe if you have a really big dinner in the evening, but you're not doing much, but you have a very busy day earlier, you might do better from an energy point of view to have a bigger breakfast, a bigger lunch, and a smaller dinner. Um, so 3 balanced meals a day with snacks if you need them, and drinking enough fluids. So making sure you're drinking 2.5 liters of fluid across the day. Very simple thing, but actually we lose about a pint of water overnight just through breathing. So we tend to be very dehydrated when we wake up in the morning. And a lot of people who've experienced a stroke, um, they underhydrate. It's really, really common. So very simply, if you can manage 3 meals a day plus enough drinks, you're off to a very good start. And what a balanced plate looks like is I'm sure you've all seen kind of this image before of a balanced plate, but it's essentially half a plate of fruit or vegetables, um, a quarter full of some kind of protein food, and a quarter of high fiber whole grain food. And um, they did a study looking at what would reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. Um, going forward. And it was very interesting. So this is done across many, many countries. It's called the Global Burden of Diseases study. And they found that the changes that we could make in our diets or to what we're eating, that would have the biggest impact would be, first of all, less salt, more fruit and veg, more whole grains, more nuts and seeds, more dairy foods, more beans, peas, lentils, more oily fish, and more healthy fats. So, what this says to me, obviously, the salt is kind of the only one that's looking at reducing down, but the big word that stands out to me is more. So, we often think, okay, I need to cut out salt, cut out fat, cut out sugar, cut. But actually, if we focus on adding in, an extra portion of fruit and veg at your breakfast or lunch, or adding in some of these foods that we know are heart healthy, um, that we get even more benefit. So it's kind of focusing on the foundations first. Um, so kind of to talk through this a little bit more. Um, so in the fruit and veg part of your plate, obviously we may not get a full half a plate of fruit or veg every time, but we should be aiming for 5 to 7 portions across the day. And if you translate that into everyday meals, that means we need to be trying to squeeze in 2 or 3 portions of fruit and veg at every meal, which can feel like a lot at certain meals and maybe quite doable at other meals. Maybe dinner tends to be easier. So portion is roughly the size of kind of a woman's fist, just to keep it very simple. Um, so even if you're having zero, even just moving it up to 1 portion, you'll still get a really significant benefit. So sometimes the small changes, the extra frozen berries in your porridge in the morning, or an extra bit of salad in your sandwich at lunch, or keeping a few bags of frozen veg in the freezer that you can throw into your dinner as well in the evening time. And I have to say, in terms of making life easy on yourself, really the frozen food aisle has come on leaps and bounds in previous years. It used to just be a bag of frozen peas, but you look in the aisles now, you can see almost everything. So if you're low on energy, things like having pre-chopped and frozen garlic, onions, butternut squash, all those things that are really tricky to chop and to prepare and take up a lot of time. So they really are a fantastic way to make life a little bit easier for yourself. When it comes to the top right hand corner of the page, or the plate here, or sorry, the bottom right hand corner, whole grain foods. So we're looking at foods that are higher in fiber here. So if anyone wants to pop into the chat, like any high fiber swaps you've made or that you enjoy. So for example, switching from Rice Krispies to Weetabix, or could be switching from white pasta to brown pasta, or it could be white bread to some kind of whole grain bread. Very simple switches, but they they'll keep you fuller for longer. They'll give you better energy across the day. They're great for your gut, but they'll also help lower your cholesterol as well, because fiber helps to lower your cholesterol. Um, and then in terms of your protein foods, so a couple of things in here. So if you've had a stroke in the past, going for at least 2 oily fish in the week is a good idea. So salmon, mackerel, herring, trout, any of those. Trying to aim for two portions across the week. White fish as well. Um, it's absolutely fine to include red meat as well if you enjoy it. Up to 3 times a week typically. Um, the the type of meat that you do want to reduce down is your processed meat, like your sausages, rashers, even things like smoked salmon as well, because they're very high in salt, but also other uh, compounds, other ingredients that aren't in fresh food. When it comes to eggs, a lot of people are worried that you need to really limit eggs or cut out eggs. Now, very, very rarely do I restrict eggs. Um, we put no restrictions on most people, and I'd only ever really restrict them if we had done every other thing and the cholesterol levels were still high. But for most people, an egg or two a day is fine, and it's not something I'd be worried about. It's more looking at how you cook the egg. Is it cooked in butter, or is it poached or boiled, that kind of thing. And then trying to fill up on peas, beans, lentils, so other types of high protein foods that are going to also be high in fiber as well, nuts and seeds as well. And then, so we've gone through fruit and veg, we've gone through our high fiber foods and our high protein foods. We also want to make sure we're including the healthier fats. And the ways we can do this are through olive oil, rapeseed oil, all the heart healthier oils, over butter, over cream, over coconut oil, and also including lots of nuts and seeds. So even a handful of nuts and seeds a day can lower your cholesterol, including oily fish, like we've mentioned already, and then foods that naturally have healthier fats in them, like avocados. Um, and obviously looking at the number of foods that we eat that tend to be higher in those saturated fat sources, like crisps and uh, takeaways and chips, those kind of foods. So let's say you are somebody who does have high cholesterol, or you're on cholesterol lowering medication. So things you can do here from a food point of view to reduce your cholesterol would be make sure you're having some oats and barley in the day. So maybe that's including some, porridge for breakfast, especially in the winter months. When it's cold out there, a nice bowl of porridge, or barley, throw some barley into a soup that you're making, and that can reduce down your cholesterol. As I said, the handful of nuts or seeds, soya foods, so things like tofu or soya beans, or soya yogurt, they can also help pull down your cholesterol. Plant stanols or sterols, or the products that contain those, so you can get the yogurts, the yogurt drinks, the spreads. And as we said, choosing things like olive oil or rapeseed oil over butter or coconut oil, and trying to limit those ultra processed foods that tend to be higher in the saturated fats, and just upping the fiber. So the more fiber we have from lean proteins, beans, lentils, the, the lower we can bring our cholesterol. And also alcohol as well. So alcohol can push up some of the fats in our blood and contribute to cholesterol. If you have had another consideration is dairy foods, actually. So most people tend to eat about 2 portions in the day, but we need 3 portions. So most of us could probably benefit from having a higher dairy intake. There's now not very strong evidence to show that low fat is better than full fat, although there's a little evidence to show that for people who have had a previous heart or stroke event, or are very high risk, and that they may benefit from low fat, but the evidence isn't as strong as it used to be. So if it's a case of you hate the taste of low fat, and if you don't go for the full fat, you won't include any dairy, then I'd go for just including any dairy food like milk, yogurt, cheese. But probably there's a little bit more evidence for the low fat. And then high blood pressure. So let's say if you're on a blood pressure lowering medication, we're going to talk a lot more about reducing salt and how we can do that and keep it tasty. Um, but generally speaking, 75% of the food or of the salt that we eat is already in the food that in our food. So it's not necessarily what we're adding in cooking or at the table. So if you can choose, fresh fish instead of smoked salmon, or piece of fresh meat over sausages or rashers, they're simple but very healthy choices. And just very simply cooking at home more. It doesn't have to be fancy, but generally the less we eat out or on the go, the lower we're relying on all those kind of saltier convenience foods. You may have heard of the DASH diet for high blood pressure. So one of the elements of that is just making sure you're hitting your 3 servings of dairy foods a day. So if you're only having a little drop of milk across the day, that might be the thing to focus on. So having high blood pressure, it's not all about reducing your salt intake. It's actually about lots of other ways you can bring it down as well. Also, getting enough fruit and veg. Obviously important for overall health, but fruit and veg and potatoes are all very high in potassium, which helps to bring down your blood pressure. Um, so another reason to eat fruit and veg. Oily fish twice a week, as we've said earlier, and limiting alcohol. So um, lower salt cooking. So there was a question coming in saying, I'm trying to eat less salt, I'm trying to use less salt in cooking, but I'm really missing the taste of it. And that's very understandable, considering um, it's hard for us to get used to that change. And also it's very common after when we might have had some taste changes naturally in our body. But patience is very important, because it can be frustratingly slow to get used to allow your taste buds the time to get used to less salt. We grow new taste buds every 1 or 2 weeks. So it actually, over the course of about 4 to 8 weeks, we have totally new taste buds in our mouth. So if you stick with it and um, stay focused for 2 months, that's most of the battle done. So you will get used to you have a much higher salt sensitivity. But what ways can we add extra flavor in? So if we're taking out salt, it's really important to bump up the flavor in other ways. And a few ways we can do that are, first of all, adding in some acids. So that could be I don't mean like actual acid, but adding in lemon juice, lime juice, something acidic that's going to hit the taste buds. And that could also be vinegar, or even something like pickled onions on top, just to bump up the flavor. Heat, so we're talking about chili flakes or smoked paprika, sweet paprika, something spicy that's going to add, again, a lot of flavor in there. Aromatics as well, so these are things like garlic, so fresh garlic, or even if you're low on energy or time, the garlic flakes as well, very handy, or garlic onion granules. So again, you don't have to have the fresh thing at home. Obviously onions, fresh onions as well would work, or root ginger, or scallions, or chives. So any of those flavors that kind of really leave that lasting flavor in your mouth. And then other herbs and spices. So really making a conscious effort to try and add in herbs and spices wherever we can. Because another plus of spices is that they're actually the highest antioxidant group in all the foods that we eat. So they help to bring down the inflammation in our body. So they're really good and tasty and help when you're cutting down on salt, but also really, really good for us. And you can pop them into anything, even, mushrooms on toast in the morning. If you add in a bit of nutmeg, you feel very fancy, and it's just it adds a little something extra to staple meals you might make. zero salt stock. So, even if you do end up adding in a small amount of salt at the end of your meal when you've prepared it, using a zero salt stock, it gives you control over exactly how much salt you want to add on your own terms. And there's lots of them available now. And then also you could look at flavorsome cooking methods. So instead of boiling or poaching, can you sear something on the pan, dry fry it, get a lovely kind of brown on the coat whatever you're cooking in a bit of flavor, through marinating, but also through using higher heats or roasting instead of boiling, just to again increase the flavor and give some excitement to your taste buds. um, Umami then, which always sounds like some Japanese, I don't know, martial arts trick, to me, but it's the other flavor that, salt, sweet, sour, all that, that we don't really hear about so much, but it's a kind of a deep earthy flavor that's kind of mushroomy, soy sauce, that kind of deep savory flavor. So if you're pulling salt out, using umami flavor helps to replace that saltiness, because it gives a depth to what you're making. So things that provide umami would be mushrooms, so all the different types of mushrooms, so you can play with it. Even porcini mushrooms that are dried, they have a really deep flavor. Tomatoes, tomato paste, even nutritional yeast, which kind of is like a powder. It comes in flakes, and toasted nuts and seeds, or even a very small amount of reduced salt soy sauce. Um, so they're going to kind of give that depth of flavor. And then other things you can do are just, if you're using canned, beans or different veg, making sure you're rinsing them off in water. So often they're tinned in kind of water and salt, and just simply throwing them into a sieve and rinsing them under the tap can reduce the salt content by 40%. So it is a lot. Um, and then, if you are really missing the taste, you can use a low salt, which is essentially a salt substitute. And instead of it being sodium chloride, it's potassium chloride. So it's replacing the sodium, which is what increases our blood pressure, with potassium. Now, this isn't suitable for everybody. It very much depends on what medications you're on and also your kidney function. So, if it's something that you're interested in trying out, check with your doctor. Um, you know, check your kidney function and make sure it's safe for you to take. But it is an option there for you. And then, so we're on to some stroke specific considerations. And the first one I wanted to talk about is fatigue. This is something I know a little bit of. I've spent the last couple of months suffering with a very bad infection, and when you've no information or no motivation or energy to make a meal, it's really really hard to to have the motivation to make something nourishing for yourself. So doesn't have to look fancy. Just keep it simple, and to the point where you could have, um, on the days when you have more energy, maybe one day a week, um, do some batch cooking and freeze the extras. So always trying to kind of choose meals that you can freeze and use at another time. And then you can just take them out the day before, let them defrost, and there's no work to do. Use pre-prepared veg, so pre-chopped or the frozen stuff just makes life easier for you. And yeah, the as I said, the frozen stuff. And then also things like microwavable grains. So, you get these sachets or packets now of whole grain rice, or ancient grains mix, or um there's loads of different types out there, and you can just stock up your cupboard with them, or just use dried pasta, dried rice, there in the cupboard, easy to use. if you don't have the energy to go to the shop and get, fresh potatoes or something. So it's just acknowledging what your actual energy levels are that day and going easy on yourself and making life easier where you can. And then every dietitian's favorite conversation topic. I used to walk around hospitals with with my Bristol stool chart. But this, like, again, this is a very important consideration because it's something that so many people suffer with across the whole population. It is incredibly common, and a lot of people kind of suffer in silence, and they're too embarrassed, or just think, oh, this is probably normal for everybody. So not really knowing what is constipation and what it isn't. So particularly if you've had a stroke, it can very, you're at a much higher risk of constipation because you might have medication side effects. You might have reduced mobility, so you're not moving around or moving your gut as much, or not doing as an intense exercise, jumping up and down or running or things like that. You also might have a lower fiber intake, particularly if you've not enough energy to do a lot of cooking from scratch. You might have a reduced appetite. You might be feeling dehydrated and not drinking enough. And also you can experience changes in the signaling between your gut and your brain, which can also contribute to changes in how your muscles in your gut work. Um, so what normal is, it can varies wildly. So from normal for one person can be, they go to the toilet 3 times a day, or they pass a bowel motion 3 times a day, or it could be 3 times a week for somebody, and that might be normal for them. But how we would define constipation would be if you're having a bowel motion less than 3 times a week, or if you're straining to go every time you go, or if you feel like after you've passed the bowel, that it hasn't really fully finished, like it's an incomplete, or if you're feeling very heavy and bloated and backed up, that feeling. So if you have kind of two of those together, two of those symptoms, so essentially either it's infrequent, it's difficult, or it's incomplete, that's probably constipation. Um, and in terms of the type, like we want to aim for on our lovely chart here, we want to aim for type 3 or 4. And obviously everybody differs a little bit in terms of, it can change throughout the month, based on your menstrual cycle. It can change based on what you're eating, how hydrated you are, stressed you are, all of that. But generally speaking, as a pattern, type 3 or 4 is the ideal. So a couple of questions to ask yourself. Often the biggest reasons are some people just aren't eating enough to promote that kind of pushing through the gut. So are you getting enough food? Are you drinking enough fluids throughout the day? And if you do want to, if this is something that you're experiencing at the moment, and it's something that you want to, obviously, of course, you want to improve it and feel much better, but increasing your fiber is one of the best ways to do that. And I'd say always try to start slowly, because if you go from 0 to 90 in terms of fiber, you will feel really bloated and it'll probably make your symptoms worse. So just gentle changes over the course of a week or so should help. And ways you could do this would be adding in some oats, very high in fiber, but also they help to soften stools. Adding in a high fiber breakfast cereal, adding in, a teaspoon or even a tablespoon of chia seeds or flaxseed, getting in more peas, beans, lentils, and maybe upping the amount of vegetables that you have throughout the day. Other things that can really help are just warm drinks. So obviously we all know coffee is great for stimulating the bowels, but it doesn't even have to be caffeinated coffee. Decaf still works, and as does just any hot drink. So if you're not a coffee fan, and you're wanting to kind of stimulate things in the morning, I'd say make sure you have a good breakfast, good sized breakfast, and have a warm drink at the same time. And if you are suffering with constipation, it's been going on a while, just talk to your GP or your pharmacist about it, because it sometimes, you know, changes to what you're eating won't really cut it, and you know, you need a little extra help. And there's lots of medications that you can take, or lots of different strategies that you can do that will help with that, and you know, and just give you the relief you need as soon as you need it. So I'm going to stop talking now, but just to summarize what we've gone through, just the basics of making sure you're having a nice even meal pattern throughout the day, 3 meals, getting enough water, and having some snacks if needed. Trying to aim for a balanced plate. And even if you don't get there all the time, just having that picture in your mind and trying to do, you know, make one change that brings you closer to how that plate looks. Generally speaking, trying to go for more whole foods, less processed, more fresh foods. We talked about a few tips for lowering your blood pressure and your cholesterol. And if you're reducing salt, all the different ways you can ramp up the flavor so that you're not missing the salt as much. And then if you're feeling fatigued, just making life as easy as possible for you, to get you through your that low energy stage. And if constipated, just understanding what the trigger might be for your body and making those changes slowly, and then talking to somebody if you need to get further help. Couple of resources you probably know all of these at this stage, but I might just point out the recipes down here on the bottom right. We have loads of recipes on our website, and they're low salt, and we've added a lot in the last couple of years, and I hope that they're, you know, full of flavor and really interesting and very doable recipes. So I hope you can enjoy them. And yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen now.